Hello, everyone. Welcome to Redmen TV and the latest episode of the Liverpool Library. And I am delighted to be joined by former Liverpool CEO Peter Moore, who has got a new book out now. It is called Game Changer: Playing to Win at Xbox, EA Sports, and Liverpool FC. And yeah, Peter, first of all, thank you very much for coming on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited about the game today, and we're delighted that I can join for an exclusive, I think, with Redmen TV. So I think this is my first time talking about the book.
I mean, see, this is what happens when you're quite cheeky and you just text. I just text you straight away and thought, let's
Well,
get
you've
it.
got my contact info, all
You
of
know,
it.
I've learned, and I know that you say this in your book as well. You don't, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I've took your advice.
Typical,
Yeah,
typical Scouser, exactly.
yeah. I am not backwards and going forwards, Peter. We know that. Right. First question. Obviously, you've had such a varied life. It's honestly at any stage of your life you could have wrote a book about that particular chapter. So why now? Why have you decided now is the right time to get this down on paper and share what is a very candid story actually with the world?
Yeah, well, if you're going to do an autobiography, you do an autobiography, and I've led a varied life, and like most people, I think a slightly imperfect life, to say the least. So you've seen how candid I am in there, and it's funny. It goes back to my days at Liverpool, where my heroes, I got to meet them, the Tommy Lawrences, the Tommy Smiths, the Ron Yates, the Roger Hunts, the Ian St. Johns, and and Peter Thompson, and a number of them passed away while I was there, and a number of them with dementia. And I don't want to get too heavy too early here, but you have this fear that, and I'm in my 70s, and you have this fear that first of all you're going to forget things, and secondly that your end of life is going to be slightly different than everything that I've been fortunate to experience. So it's a time where I think you document your life for your future generations. And I often refer to a book I read called Shoe Dog, which is Phil Knight, the founder of Nike. And in that book, the forward said, "For my grandchildren, so they know." And that's always stuck with me from the perspective of documenting your life. I've been lucky. I've been so fortunate from, young Scouser growing up and moving to Wrexham. And, you've scanned through the book and I ended up in America. And I've been very fortunate, and a lot of the book is how you leverage your strengths and how you leverage your background and provide for the generations that come behind you and make life better for them. And that's what life should be. So I decided to document it primarily before I forgot it all.
So yeah, you've done a really good job. Like I say, I have read it this morning. I thought it was fantastic. The mad thing is, like I say, Peter, this interview could take 2 hours because you've done so much. Whether it be in the trainers world, in the video game world, in the football sports world, it's been absolutely crazy. But I think, yeah, how does a lad who was born post-war in Liverpool end up eventually just like getting to the point where you're moving to America and you're working at Reebok and EA Sports? I mean, that is a very atypical path for anybody's life. I think you have had a one of one life there.
Yeah, I think you leverage where you come from, and I talk a lot about being born in Liverpool and what that means for being a Scouser and the kind of genetic personalities we have. That if you use it well around the world, being British in general, Americans for some reason think when we speak with a British accent, which I don't have anymore, but when I first came to America, that somehow we're smarter and more intellectual, and so you leverage that. Growing up in a pub and serving behind the bar when I was 11 years of age, and my dad let me open the pub, and getting to be an adult early, being a PE teacher, which I always say was, getting 35 boys 8 times a day to do something they never wanted to do, which is get out there in the snow of North Wales and play rugby and football. And so that all comes together, which is you. And when I arrived, and I took a chance, my college professor at Madeley College of PE, came to America and wanted me to come to America. And I always remember looking out the window there in December 1980 when he called me, and snow's coming in sideways in North Wales. And I thought, screw it, I'm going to give it a go, and moved to Long Beach, California. And I had a tough couple of years living in a trailer, a mobile home, a caravan, and working my way through. But all of it was this concept of remembering who you are and taking stock of what you've got. And we've all got our own attributes. and working your way through life and standing on the shoulders of a lot of people who helped me along the way, remembering those people. And that's also why you write a book, is to pay homage to the people who have helped you along the way. But, I don't know if you've ever seen my TED talk, but I talk about the power of Scousness. And that's the thread I hope runs throughout the book.
You've took the words right out of my mouth. The power of Scousness, I love that phrase. Obviously, I encourage everybody to go and buy the book, but can you just explain to people right now what you mean by the power of Scousness? Because the first time I read it in the book, it brought a big smile to my face. I kind of understood it, but yeah, what does that mean to you?
When you're born, particularly, I'm born in post-war Liverpool, 1955. It's still rationing had only just ended. My dad's got a pub on Scotty Road. My dad's, freight clerk when I'm first born. I'm living in South Liverpool, Allerton. I go to school at Springwood on Mather Avenue around the back of Allerton there. And it's tough times, but we're Scousers. And I think that resilience that maybe is post-war generation, not only of who we are as Liverpudlians, but coming out of the war. And, we got bombed in May of 41 into oblivion. 4,500 Liverpudlians died. But throughout it all, this sense of resilience, self-belief, kind of circling the wagons around Merseyside. And, the old Scouse, not English thing comes into play there. And this sense of self-belief of who we are, almost superior, if you will, at times to others because of who we are and what we've been through. And you can take that into more modern times through the tragedies of the football club and everything we go through there. That all comes together, and genetically, that's who Liverpudlians are. And you can either be that and be placid and docile and just, that's who you are, or you can use that to your advantage in your life. And I chose the latter.
It's interesting because, like you mentioned before, you've moved to America a long time. The accents changed and things like that. But
Oh, yeah.
it's clear, or just speaking to you and knowing you, of course, but also reading the book for people who don't, that your connection with Liverpool has never wavered. Forget the football club for a second. I mean the city. I know you're still involved, with the food banks, and you're still involved with
Yeah.
various charities. You come over quite a lot, but all throughout this book, I find it interesting that you do refer to Liverpool, the city, pretty much every step of the way. It's like, I learned this in Liverpool. The people in
Yeah.
Liverpool taught me this. I mean, that has never wavered. Like, that comes across in the book. I'm guessing that's something you're proud of, that you're from here and you've used that, like you say, you've leveraged that and you've used that to your advantage.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember in the book, when my dad moved us to Wrexham, to Marford, which is a little village between Wrexham and Chester, and my accent was thick Scouse then, and my nickname immediately, because people didn't move in those days. I'm arriving in North Wales with this thick Liverpudlian accent. So my nickname straight away was Scouse. This is 1965. To this day, Steve, people will meet me from those days. All right there, Scouse lad. And it's like, and I obviously don't speak like that anymore, although I can. But from the perspective of people will still call me Scouse. And that, the roots, I think in my TED talk, I say, embrace the bows that hold you up, because from that is who you are. And that's who we are. And a lot of people, I don't know if they move away from Liverpool and they choose to maybe not look back and not embrace their Liverpudlianness. I chose the opposite, and I've always done it because you reflect upon, some days I'm so lucky I can go to things and meet people and get involved in things, and every now and again you go, how did I get here? And it's because I'm a Scouser. We get where water can't, as we're fond of saying. And so from that perspective, and the football club comes to play, as you read in the book, so many times about the values of the football club and what we've stood for and what we've been through and who we are and how we come together and the social impact, to your point, of what football means in this world. And I've embraced the football as a power for good for many, many years. And I did my master's thesis all the way back 40 odd years ago, which is the subculture of football in British society back from the hooligan days of the 70s and 80s, but what football means to us and how, when it's corralled correctly, what a power for good it can be. And you talk about the food banks, and there's so many instances of what we do, particularly in our city there, of what we do to embrace football and use it as a platform to do good.
Absolutely. You've worked, Peter, like I say, for those who don't know, very brief, you've worked in the trainers industry, you've worked in the gaming industry, you've worked in the football industry. Like, those are probably three of the most competitive worlds you can think of, whether it's Nike v Reebok or Adidas, then you're in the gaming world with Microsoft versus Sony, it's Liverpool versus City, Real Madrid, whatever. You don't come across quite often as like a really competitive guy. You seem kind of chill, but clearly you've got that in you. And again, that comes across in the book because there's zero chance. Are you an uber competitive guy even still now?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, I love being, we talk about a challenger brand, and it sounds weird to say. I always like being number two. I always, because I think you can throw punches a little better. And so I went from the sneaker wars of Reebok versus Nike. Younger viewers won't remember Reebok was a powerhouse back in those days. And I thought my greatest moment was the club was being at Anfield in 96 and announcing the Reebok deal, which we'd taken from Adidas. And so I went from the sneaker wars to the console wars where the stakes were even higher. I loved it because I could leverage my Liverpudlianness, tattoos and everything else that the stuff will do to attract attention, to throw punches. As I, again, in the book, Steve Ballmer of Microsoft brings me and says, we need somebody like you who can throw punches because fundamentally he said, we're just a bunch of nerds. But my job is to be on stage, challenge PlayStation. And these are multi-billion-dollar bets we're placing. And so you got a Scouser in the middle of that with that kind of money flying around. You bet that I'm going to be cheeky and irreverent, and which the gamers love. They embrace the console wars, high stake wars of who is going to be first to 10 million units in the living room. And I lap that stuff up because that's from where I come from. And so, yeah, my personality is relatively chill, but boy, you give me goals and objectives and off I go.
again, those let's go first. Like the train, you could say sneaker wars, I'll say trainers, but
Yeah, yeah.
like yeah, being in that world for a start. Again, it's such a different time, of course. Like say, Reebok's one of the brands of the world. It's interesting that you said you're like the underdog or number two, and you're punching up towards it. Like you just give that a pretty good go. Like it went pretty well. What was it that made you think, you know what, we can go for Nike. We can really push them because, like I say, there would be other businesses who would be quite content to go. Yeah, we're happy being here, but you guys really did shoot for the stars
Oh,
there.
yeah, yeah. Well, I did 10 years of Patrick,
Yeah,
and you got to be old to remember Patrick Boots, but they were a cult following of Boots. And that's where I got my first ever real job in America, was driving around Southern California in a Toyota Camry with my samples of my Keegan Golds and my Michel Platini Supers and selling those door to door. This is 15 years before the internet. And this is, going to phone boxes, getting yellow pages, writing down the address and getting a map out, and then driving to the sporting goods store and cold calling. So my life, that's where I got my first real job. That's where I leveraged my Scouseness of, my accent became a little more refined in English. But I'd never sold a thing in my life. I'm a PE teacher, but boy, I gifted the gab and talking my way through it. Yeah, but I love the idea of being that challenger. And when we went to Reebok, we knew that we needed to globalize our brand. Reebok had just come out of the aerobics boom, where Reebok at one point was number one trainer brand, sneaker brand in the world, and it had ridden this rising tide of aerobics and fitness, but it couldn't break out internationally apart from the UK market, and it needed soccer, football to be that. So boy, did we go after it. We go to Italy, we start building beautiful footwear. We go get Dennis Bergkamp, Ryan Giggs, Andy Cole, and over here players like Eric Ronaldo, and so we go and you read my story of World Cup and great stories of Carlos Valderrama and paying players cash for wearing our boots and getting arrested at Paris airport, bringing boots in for the Paraguayan team to play France the next day. And so these were the Wild West days. And we were a shining light within Reebok. Reebok, more generally, was really struggling as Nike was exploding in the 90s. And then at 44 years of age, Steve, I'm like, I'm without a job. We're getting killed. And it's like, what do you know about video games? And okay, Sega. And off I go and learn a brand new industry. And, I talk a lot about imposter syndrome, and I had that in bucket loads during that first period there. But very quickly got video games under my skin, and fell in love with the entire industry and the people. But again, that was very much, again, the Wild West. We were still in dial-up modem days. This is before broadband, and the Dreamcast was well ahead of its time, online console. But we would do amazing things to engage gamers, and make it feel like fun, and make it feel like it's Sega versus Nintendo versus Sony PlayStation, which it was. And again, you leverage, and I was the perfect guy at being a Liverpudlian to be in the middle of that, throwing the punches.
Oh yeah, you did a pretty good job, Peter. It's fair to say. I know I'm going to talk about Liverpool in a moment. Before I do,
Yeah,
this is a question about the book, and it's about the process of it, because you mentioned before you're quite candid and quite open in the book. You speak about personal stuff, health issues. You mentioned imposter syndrome before. Like, your story, you didn't really have to do that. If you didn't want to, but you have basically chosen to be pardon the pun, a very open book here. Like, you haven't held back. Was that not a concern for you? You've just thought, listen, I'm quite happy to put all this out there, because there is quite a bit of personal stuff in there that well, it is very personal to you in your life, and you mentioned being imperfect at certain times, and we've all been that. But to put that out there to the world, like, was there ever any reservations about doing that?
yeah. I mean, it's a risk, but then you think a lot. Writing a book is not easy, and it took
No.
me 2 years, and the process and finding a publisher and rewrite. And do you hide stuff, and do you only present yourself as this, shining light of business? And that felt inauthentic to me. You read about what I've done, and in particular divorce, and I felt like I wouldn't feel good about myself if I just wrote about all the good things. And it wouldn't be a lesson to everybody. We don't know what's going on in people's heads. We really don't. And in a Gosh, I mean, look what's just happened, as one of our Liverpool family in the last 10 days, and you just don't know. And so my right or wrong, because it's embarrassing to me, because some of the stuff that I've done is embarrassing. And but it's like I needed to portray myself as human, I think is the best way. And imperfect. And in particular, when you get into the personal stories of divorce, and then finding happiness, later on. It was a choice I had to make. Otherwise, it's a business book. And bluntly, I'd read a few reviews of people in my industry written business books, and the reviews are like, "There's this guy, he presents himself as perfect, and there's enough people know enough about you know that's not the case. There's very few perfect people around." So yeah, and I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, yeah, I'm pretty open about my life, and here I am now, with a blended family of 6 kids, each of which I'm very proud of, and all doing great. But the journey there, as you've read, it wasn't perfect.
No, I was about to say, because I know you're a very humble guy, but like, your story will be inspirational to others. So I find it nice that you could have just presented yourself. Yeah, I was here, and I worked hard, and I got to there, and then I got to there, and I got to there. But yeah, I think anyone who ever wants to follow in your footsteps, nobody's perfect, and I think that comes across. Even you, who's been pretty successful, has got some
Yeah.
flaws as well. Let's move to Liverpool then. I love the story of when you sat with dinner, and when you tell your family that you're going to Liverpool, and everyone
Oh
cheers.
yeah.
And it's interesting, Peter, because it's like, I was going to say, how do you become the CEO of Liverpool? How does that become a thing? And I was thinking, there's a process where you have to apply for a job, and you sit down interviews with 7 different people. And basically, someone came to you and said, "Do you want a job?" And you were like, "No." "Well, it's at Liverpool." "Yes." Like that's so crazy. Like, I know you mentioned the book, but there was no way you were coming back to England until this person said to you, "Do you want to work for Liverpool?" That's fair to say.
Yeah. No, I remember the day like it was yesterday. It was in the summer of 2016. I'm in my offices. I'm the chief operating officer of EA. And if you've been following EA the last few days, if I was still there, I probably wouldn't be talking to you now. I'd be owning my own island in Hawaii somewhere. But I loved being at EA. I was as I say, the COO, and you get a call. What happens? You get a call from an executive recruiter in America. We call them headhunters that are looking, yeah, interested, and I'm going. I remember looking out the window, Steve, and it was a gorgeous day, the usual California day, in my office on the fourth floor in the EA headquarters. And would you ever move back to England? No, I've been gone 37, 38 years by then. And it was like, what if it was to be CEO of Liverpool Football Club? And that then sparked what ended up being months of conversations with, at first, Spencer Stewart, the executive recruitment company in London, and then secondarily, FSG, in particular, Mike Gordon, who was my boss, of, how do we make this move? Does it work? You're a big Liverpool fan. Is that a plus or a minus? And that's something that I talk a lot about in the book, and I still think about it right now. And can you move and relocate to Liverpool? And you're I wasn't even married, Debbie, my partner then, and we married in Liverpool. It was a lot of stuff, and I was leaving millions of dollars. And I don't say that to be a braggart, but the way that it works is you get equity over years and years and years of stocks, and they're ahead of you to keep you at the company. And I just walked away from that because money wasn't important for me at that point. It was like, can I do something that my dad, who'd been gone a long time, would look down and smile that his son was the CEO of Liverpool Football Club? And that was what I thought. God's honest truth, it was very much about my dad and taking me to that first game at Anfield in 1959 and imbuing in me this love of the club. And money was immaterial. It was the ability to give back, I thought, to a football club that had given me so much in my life. And all of the things we've talked about, Liverpool was teaching me, the football club was teaching me those lessons, unconsciously all the way, adversity and leveraging what you've got, all of this. And so I owed it to the city, to the people, to the football club. Walk away from what you got, walk away from the sunshine, walk away from the money, go serve the city, the people, the club that has given you so much joy over, at that point, 60 years.
It went pretty well, Peter. It really did. And I'm going to, again, go and read the book. Everyone watching this, listen to this with Liverpool supporters. I'm not going to go through too much. Go and read it. But I need to pick your brains about one little part of this, if you don't mind, because I found this bit. Well, I'll be honest, I was laughing when I read this part. It's about you're sat next to Kenny Dalglish at Manchester City in the Champions League away. And Liverpool have obviously beaten them at Anfield. It was a little bit tumultuous with the buses and things like that. And then you go to their ground and they score. But could you just tell the people just this little snippet for me, because I was laughing. So you're sat next to Kenny Dalglish at Manchester City away, and it's fair to say you've had a bit of a good time.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, you've got to read the context. Remember, I mean, it was volatile at Anfield, and I've got a bit of PTSD because when the bus, what was it? Cronenberg, not Cronenberg. What was the
Copperberg?
That's right. Yeah. And I had to go in and apologize to Ferran Soriano, I mean, Khaldoon. I mean, the Sheikh was there, and it's like, and I'm still a little nervous. So when we go away, all right, we've got a good lead, but it's the Champions League, and the stakes are high, and of course they score early. I'm going, oh, and you go, here you go. But Kenny, Kenny being Kenny, and I loved going and being in Kenny and Marina's proximity, and Kenny was up for it. And look, he hasn't kicked a ball in a long time, but he's kicking every ball that's out there right there. And if you recall, I don't know if you went to the Etihad, but they put these plastic white and sky blue flags on every seat. And so they start waving the white flags. And Kenny basically says, "Do they realize that, and I may have changed what he called them for to protect the innocent in the book, nimmies or whatever he might have called. He may have called them something different. But the bizarre, Kenny pointed out, they're all there waving white flags, and so I assume that's the little snippet you're talking about. But it was Kenny pointing it out. It hadn't occurred to me that it felt like the entire Etihad was surrendering, And what a great night that was. It was 5-1 in aggregate, obviously. So our fears didn't materialize. But Kenny being Kenny, always, if you sit near him, he's giving you little, nuggets of what's going on.
I also
Hilarious.
I also like the fact that when the goals go in, Kenny's not backwards in celebrating those goals. Even around the Manchester City dignitaries, you guys are, especially Kenny's giving it a little bit of celebrations
Yeah,
when them goals go in.
yeah. And Kenny, look, there's a certain protocol when a goal is scored. We always adhere to. There's been a couple of instances where the away directors, and I won't name names, but you jump up and you applaud, absolutely. But once in a while, and I remember one in particular, guy jumps up, he's the director in the front row of the director's box, jumps on his seat and is screaming at all the Liverpool fans around him. And we have to calm people down because, you just don't want to be winding people up that way. And we'd like to be, we're Liverpool, so there's a sense of warmth and welcome. And the other thing, you may have read in the book, rightly or wrongly, I would get on the microphone in the boardroom and welcome everybody. And the visiting directors loved it. Manchester United, Man City. I remember Bournemouth, Jeff Mostyn, and West Ham, David Gold, and so and they just loved it. And I would welcome to Anfield. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Liverpool, and I would quote some nuggets of games that we played against each other, how long we've been playing. That's who we are as Liverpoolians. It's not come sit down, have something to eat, and then we're not going to talk to you. No, it was quite the opposite there. So yeah, but Kenny loved it, and would always get the dig in. But he was always under control. And when Marina and Paul and Lauren and whoever happens to be there from the Dalglishers, it was always incredibly entertaining. And people loved the King, obviously. So there's always, and these are the thrills to this day. Sat there for me with Rookie on one side and Kenny on the other, just you pinch yourself every now and again. Just is this real life type thing?
Absolutely living the dream. Thanks very much, Pete, for that one. Yeah, go and get the book. Game Changer is available now. If you want to read some inside stories around the whole Liverpool winning the league, there you go. Pete's got a copy for you. Look at that. Fantastic cover as well. Liverpool winning the league, what it was like to work with Jurgen Klopp, what it was like to be in the pandemic when Liverpool won the title. It's all in there. So
Barcelona, a chapter on its own.
I mean, you could have wrote a book on it. You could. I mean, we might do that at some point at Redmen. We're not as good as you, but we might. There's certain things we can write about for sure. Pete, thanks very much for joining us. Like I say, everybody, please do go out and get the book. I promise you'll enjoy it. But yeah, Pete, thanks very much.
My pleasure. Cheers, everyone.